Ahoy hoy, thanks for joining me once again. Now I'm going to wade in on this topic with a reply video to Dawnforged Cast, who was asking about the comparison of rolling versus point buy. Is it legit? Okay, I'm just going to come in with a personal opinion, okay? And of course, it's not right, it's not wrong, it's just mine. Okay, here we go. The idea of the two, they do seem to, on the face of things, encourage different kinds of player and hence play. So, a points buy system is, of course, more open heavily to the potential for misuse, abuse, or min-maxing, let's just say, if you want to call that abuse. Some groups may do that, and that could be their legit type of play, If the GM's fine with that, and he wants a sort of power max type play, and all the group are that way, then, who's anybody to intervene on them guys? But for those that sort of see the tabletop role-playing game as a unique opportunity to do something different than you would normally do in, say, computer games, where you have a cookie-cutter build and you check online and check all the best builds in MMOs and things like this, where you could actually be something unique, something completely yours, unshackled by the limitations that computer games would normally put upon you. And to me, really, that is the greatest thing about role-playing games. I think when you're looking at this idea of a points buy system, it isn't necessarily just the case of, here is your points, allocate them. There are other ways to do it. You could, of course, count up how many attributes there are, so let's just say there's 8. So you'd roll the dice, say 8 times, and then you determine where you're going to put those rolls. That's another way you could do it. That way you could say, well, I want my highest one to be in such, but you haven't fully min-maxed. The chances are you won't have rolled the very top score. If it was, say, a D20 system, the chances are you wouldn't have rolled a 20 8 times. You may have, but you might have other stats that you want that 20 in instead, or whatever to go towards. In the case of like the D100 percentile systems, 31 is considered the average starting human if it's something like, say, Dark Heresy. So, if you hit a 31, you think, oh, that's all right then. 31% chance of success, essentially. A points buy system, I feel the most useful part of that is allowing you to attempt to create something in conjunction with the GM, specific. In particular, if you know what you're doing and the GM's got it under control as well, and he's happy with it, then you could potentially make something that isn't a min-maxed character, but that is very specific. Or you could suggest to the GM, and maybe even let the GM make it for you, and then hand it to you. I mean, that's another way, and just sort of like look at it as a character to play. Remember, it's not a computer game. Of course, what you have to remember here, versus this min-maxing idea, is that all the adventurers out in a world, in whatever given system of world it is, they wouldn't all be that perfectly attuned to their class, would they? They would have different elements about them. I mean, none of us can control how we are born, what genetics we have, and especially in like a fantasy world, there's no genetic modification and engineering at all, is there? So, I mean, you are just born with the limits that you're born with. You might be born with, not really very much muscle tone, not a very good indicator towards it, genetically. Or you might have a genetic tendency towards being very unacrobatic. But there's a difference between what we're born with and then what we strive to overcome. I mean, look at the Paralympics guys. I mean, they're not just wallowing in like what has become of them. They're doing something, making something of themselves. Or there was that guy with the one leg. He had the traffic accident, and then he was just hopping, and he's like a karate black belt, just with hopping. And he did the treadmill hop Guinness Book of Records, and completely broke that, for instance, and above and beyond what anybody else who couldn't, who had 2 legs trying to compete could do. You see, so it's that element of how much we decide to push ourselves, and that push and learning, that for me is experience points. So you've got the starting thing, So I think there is something rich about the idea of some degree of randomization at the beginning. It's nice to sort of know that, well, I've got to work on that still. Now, of course, some systems, they have a thing where they say, no, it's all completely random rolls, but like you have like 1 or 2 statistic swap rounds. And I mean, that's another way of doing it, saying, well, you've got to grace 1 or 2 to use, or 1, 2, or 3. Warhammer Fantasy did this a bit as well. But there is another critical flaw, I think, in a lot of the thinking, which is being very, very self-contained, very, very inward. Because what I've noticed as a tendency towards is saying, well, look, this is how D&D would do it. And by D&D's play, I would then have to do this. So you have to sometimes look out of that box, out of Pathfinder, out of the D&D prototype skeleton, and say, well, what about other systems? How would they handle things? And maybe I can use something a bit like another system to make this system make more sense. Just house rule something if you don't like it. I mean, it's your game. You don't have to play it pure at all. As an example of what I'm on about, okay, a lot of you guys say, well, okay, if you roll low stats, and then you've got a low stat guy in the group, and then higher stat guys in the group, okay, and it's definitely that you shouldn't let, like, some people point by and some people have to randomize, because that would be sort of unfair, wouldn't it? So, make sure they're all on the same page, and make sure, if they are like a random or semi-random or allocate after random rolls or whatever, if it's some sort of system like that, the weaker the players are, you might be saying, okay, the system encourages them to, want to point spy. It encourages them to, get the experience for victory, for success in that particular objective, and because they've got the high stats, they've managed that success. You've got to, perhaps, I'll challenge you, take experience, right, and turn it on its head from the normal D&D type of thinking. What about what Dragon Age does? And that is to reward struggle. So if you breeze something, you get very, very low experience. And that could be used in all systems. That could be used in Dark Heresy. You could bring that over to D&D, why not? And you could say, well, okay, they really, really struggled here, actually. So because they actually struggled so much, they learnt more from the struggle. They've had to work harder. Their muscles have worked harder. Their minds have worked harder. The challenge. Or you could say, well, it was something really clever they came up with that entertained me as a GM. Okay, that I wasn't expecting at all. It made me laugh. It made me smile. You're going to get experience for that. So suddenly this guy that, isn't suddenly really high stats, or maybe the rest of his group as well, they might be getting loads more experience than they normally would have got from that module. Because they struggled so hard. And then they catch up, don't they? And then, of course, you've got that huge power creep that you all go on about in D&D anyway. That once you hit a certain level, people just end up becoming demigods basically in the end, and blah 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 blah. Complaint. Well, you put that off a bit longer, don't you? Don't you twist out that sweet spot for a bit longer as well? So that's my input on it. I'm simply here to say, let's take a look at the issue. And let's take a look at it from a different angle. What do you think about that one, guys? And thanks to the original poster for putting the topic up there. Take care, and I'll see you at the table.